So 6 months into the reform after plenum, what do you think is the overall progress so far?
I think there has been some progress already in various domains, maybe not quite as fast as would be desirable.
In terms of the approach of SOE reform, do you think it's kind of right to focus on mixed ownership?
I hope that SASAC will be abolished. It has completely failed in its objective of improving the performance of state-owned companies.
今天我们约到的是美国的中国通尼克拉迪博士。他自从1978年第一次来到中国，当年写就第一本关于中国的书，可以毫不夸张地说，他是西方研究中国问题方面的泰斗。让我们来听听关于中国诸多的改革事项，他是否仍然保持乐观。
随着经济回温企稳，外界预期未来数月决策层对经济增速的担忧有望缓解，尤其是在下半年外需增强的良好预期之下，包括国企改革在内的其他重点领域改革有望获得进展。面对国企改革这道历史难题，新的思路是否已经浮出水面
？So 6 months into the reform after plenum, what do you think is the overall progress so far? Do you think it's encouraging or it's kind of slightly slower than desired?
Well, I would start by saying that the design put forward in the third plenum document is very comprehensive and very ambitious. I think that's a very good beginning. I think there has been some progress already in various domains, maybe not quite as fast as would be desirable, but I think if you look historically over the last 35 years that reform generally tends to move slowly, and it's not possible to really measure the progress until you look back 2 or 3 years after a new initiative was started, and then you realize that the changes have been really fairly profound. So I'm still open-minded on the question of pace.
On SOE reform, right now it seems, as you pointed out yesterday, it's more on an individual basis. What do you think will likely follow these?
Well, I think the biggest reform that's been announced is the demonopolization of sectors where state-owned firms have been highly protected, like telecoms, financial services, oil and gas, certain other parts of the service sector. And if the government really follows through on eliminating these kinds of sectoral monopolies, it will open up a huge portion of the economy to more competition. Particularly from private domestic companies. And that process generated a huge amount of growth in the industrial sector, and particularly in manufacturing, since the late 1970s. But in the service sector, there's been much less introduction of competition because of these protections of the incumbent firms, which are invariably state-owned companies. So the best evidence is that private firms in the service sector, for example, have a return on assets that's more than twice that of state companies. So if you open up those sectors to more foreign, not necessarily foreign, more private players, that could have a huge positive effect on China's economic growth over the medium term. This is one of the reasons I think that China can move to an environment with a lower share of investment, because if the financial system is reformed in a way that more credit flows to the private sector, China can generate the same level of growth with a much lower rate of investment. Not immediately, but over a period of years.
More specifically, in terms of the approach of SOE reform, do you think it's kind of right to focus on mixed ownership, most likely with the subsidiary company of big SOEs, rather than work to establish proper corporate governance structures, i.e., say, SASAC stepping away from micromanaging the daily operations of SOEs?
I hope that SASAC will be abolished. It has completely failed in its objective of improving the performance of state-owned companies. There was a little pickup in the profits of state-owned companies under SASAC between 2003 and 2007. But since 2007, the growth of profits of SASAC, of firms that are under SASAC's jurisdiction, has basically collapsed. There's been some growth of profits in absolute terms, but of course the economy's been growing very rapidly. So the return on assets of SASAC companies has come down dramatically. It's now in the neighborhood of about 3%. And everybody might have their own estimate, but it's impossible to think that the real cost of capital in China today is less than 7%. So SASAC's objective was to revitalize these companies, make them more productive. Some people call this making them national champions, but it hasn't happened. And they've had more than 10 years to try to turn things around. So I think the evidence is that China should try a different approach. And I think that means more competition in the sectors where some SASAC firms are protected. They have grown their profits, but it's largely by growing their assets even faster, which means that the productivity has come down, and these firms are a big drag on China's economic growth. And I think once that's recognized, that will give some further impetus to reform of SOEs.
18届三中全会提出了全方位的改革议程，此后半年时间，各项改革措施有序推进，伴随着中国经济增长减速和稳步筑底，开始逐步释放出改革红利。但结合眼下中国经济的风险来看，并没有能到乐观的时候。
One of the kind of most imminent risk facing China, many people think, is the property market. We already seen trading volume down significantly, and price already shows signs of declining. What do you think is this round of property slowdown different from previous slowdowns? Perhaps what's the cause of it?
In the previous instances, the slowdowns were, as measured by sales volume or the starts, the new initiatives by property developers, only lasted a couple of quarters, and then the market swung up again. I think the major driver of property is expectations. A very large share of the sales of new property are to people that already own a house or a flat. They're buying another one for investment. And if they wake up tomorrow morning and decide that maybe prices aren't going to be going up over the next 5 years, then the demand for this kind of investment property could disappear very, very quickly. And that could lead to a very significant and sustained slowdown in property sales. But in previous occasions that didn't happen. So it's very difficult to anticipate how people's expectations will change.
Yes, so we already kind of see government, various local governments relaxing the controls on buying houses. And central governments, especially the PBOC, is stepping in to strengthening the credit for mortgage payments. Do you think this kind of government intervention is necessary at this stage?
Well, I think it's debatable whether it's necessary, but more importantly, it's debatable whether or not it will work.
That's right, yeah.
Because in the past, people have had to have high down payments as the government has put in these restrictions on buying multiple properties. Maybe now some of those high down payment requirements will be eased or maybe even eliminated. But if people don't think prices are going to keep going up, it may not make any difference. And so eliminating the high down payment requirement for multiple properties could have very little effect on demand. I know a lot of people think, oh, if the government takes off these restrictions, the market's going to recover immediately. Maybe, but maybe not. It's hard to anticipate.
Taking a more long-term view, understandably, kind of all around the world, property sector is playing a very important role in each economy. But perhaps nowhere like in China, property is taking such a vital role in all the upstream and downstream sectors. Do you think China should, over the time, reduce its reliance on the property sector?
Absolutely. The only two countries that I'm aware of that have invested a higher share of GDP in property are Ireland and Spain. And those situations, shall we say, did not exactly end very favorably. So I think the sooner China can reduce the demand, reduce the reliance on property demand as a driver of economic growth, the better off the government will be, and the better off Chinese people will be. And I think that obviously entails a rebalancing, away from investment towards more private consumption expenditure to generate aggregate demand.
And maybe they should put in some brakes before a possible collapse. That's something they worry about as well.
Yes. But the good thing about China property market is that compared to, say, Ireland or Spain or the US, the leverage in the property sector is substantially less. So there's a macroeconomic risk of a slowdown if the demand for property moderates, but the financial consequences could be significantly less than those other markets.
在经历年初数月的贬值后，最近几周人民币持续升值，即期汇率和中间价双双走强。机构认为，人民币长期升值趋势并未改变，这与此前市场对于人民币进入贬值通道的预测大相径庭。到底是什么原因造成了人民币形势的逆转？
Another hot topic nowadays is the kind of exchange rate, which is the main topic. Secretary of State, Treasury Secretary Jack Lew came to Beijing to visit last week. So, do you see the recent developments in the past 3 months with RMB exchange rate as healthy?
I think, yes, basically I think the policy of the last 3 months has been healthy. I think it's consistent with the long-term desire of the central bank to have two-way movement in the movement of the RMB value, and the steady upward appreciation over a period of time led to a very substantial increase in the so-called carry trade, people wanting to bring money into China to take advantage of appreciation, and that had unfavorable consequences from the point of view of the central bank in terms of managing money supply. So they want to reduce those carry trades. So I think having a period of depreciation of the currency will be helpful in achieving that goal. So I think it's, and part of it is, maybe even a large part of it has been market driven. It's not surprising that you find a currency depreciating a little bit when expectations of growth, current and future growth are declining. It's not unusual to see a currency depreciate. So it's not clear the relative magnitude of, say, market forces versus government intervention over this period. But I don't think it's been pure intervention that has led to the result we've seen.
Mm-hmm. So from a fundamental perspective, do you think the exchange rate is at its equilibrium value or fair value right now? And given China's faster growth rate compared to other economies, is it still going to have a steady pace of appreciation, say 2 to 3% each year?
Well, I think we have to begin by being a little bit humble and recognizing that, economists may talk about equilibrium values of an exchange rate, but we don't really have the ability to identify that with very much precision. I think we should be thinking in terms of ranges. And I think Chinese currency is probably within some reasonable range of an equilibrium value. The current account surplus is extremely small now compared to what it was 6 or 7 years ago. It's only about 2%. So I think the great concern about an undervalued RMB is a thing of the past. And the reason I say that is that long-term appreciation would be caused by higher productivity growth in China compared to the rest of the world. There's a lot of people focus on the labor market and are so worried that the slowdown in the growth of the labor market is going to lead to slower growth in China. But productivity growth, that is the amount of output per unit of all the inputs, has been much, much more important in generating growth over the last 3 decades or more, much, much more important than the growth of the labor force.
今天的对话中，他的2个观点令我印象深刻。一是关于股市改革，尽管 IPO 重启，但他认为中国政府应该摒弃股市价格管制的做法。关于国企改革，他的观点更是语出惊人。这一类改革当然知易行难，但是正如他在2年前的书中所写的，他仍然对中国改革的前景保持谨慎的乐观。